Have you ever looked at someone at the top, calling the shots, giving orders, getting applause, and thought, how, in the name of all that's rational, did this person get there? We've all seen this movie before. People who are clearly unqualified, incompetent, even dangerous, being promoted, celebrated, followed. Meanwhile, brilliant, ethical, and highly capable minds are stuck behind the scenes, forgotten, silenced. Remember the Roman Emperor Nero, playing the lyre while Rome burned to the ground? Or more recently, Elizabeth Holmes, who convinced the world and billionaires with a technology that never actually worked. The list goes on. And disturbingly, it all feels too familiar. It's so absurd, so repetitive, it almost feels like a badly told joke. But what if it's not a coincidence? What if there's an invisible, yet very real system that favors the least prepared? A twisted logic that rewards manipulation over competence? Today, we're traveling across centuries to dive into the mind of one of the most feared and misunderstood political thinkers in history, Niccolò Machiavelli. Get ready to face his raw, uncomfortable, and brutally honest insights into why stupidity and power have always walked hand in hand. And don't be fooled. This isn't just dusty old philosophy buried in forgotten books. It's a living psychological phenomenon that still shapes our world, from corporate boardrooms to the dark halls of political power. The truth is uncomfortable, but necessary. Sometimes, being intelligent is exactly what holds you back from rising to the top. And understanding this paradox might just be the key to uncovering the hidden systems that manipulate the society around us, or even to helping you carve your own path toward real influence. In the 16th century, exiled from the politics he so deeply loved, Machiavelli wrote, pen in hand, filled with indignation, what would become the most controversial political treatise in history, The Prince. Unlike the utopian thinkers who came before him, Machiavelli didn't dream of perfect worlds. He sought to understand the world as it truly is. Raw, unequal, immoral. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. This phrase isn't just a provocation. It's the very core of Machiavellian thought. Because when the game is power, perception often matters more than truth. And that's exactly where this story begins. The first clue to unravel this paradox is unsettling. Appearing competent often counts more than actually being competent. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He noticed that truly intelligent leaders, instead of mastering the game of power, often ended up stumbling over it. Why? Because intelligence rarely travels alone. It usually comes bundled with traits that, ironically, become brutal weaknesses once you enter the arena of power struggles. Complex thinking, ethics, self-awareness. Now imagine what happens when a brilliant mind is thrown into a corrupt power structure. They see nuances where others see easy answers. They recognize uncertainties where others promise miracles. They doubt themselves while their rivals radiate theatrical confidence. But here's the problem. In environments where the loudest voice weighs more than the deepest reasoning, these virtues become obstacles. Think of Socrates, the ultimate symbol of critical thought. The man who challenged certainties, who asked too many questions. He was condemned to death by the very democracy he helped shape. His famous, "I know that I know nothing," immortalized him as a titan of philosophy. But it also sealed his fate as a political failure. Meanwhile, history is filled with populist leaders who rallied crowds by promising absolute certainties and dangerously simple answers. And this isn't just philosophical theory. A controversial 2017 study published in the Journal of Management dropped a bombshell. Intelligence helps leadership up to a point, specifically up to an IQ of about 120. Beyond that, the effect can actually reverse. According to researchers, people who are extremely intelligent struggle to connect with others. Their mental patterns are so complex they often become incomprehensible or even intimidating to most people. Being too smart can, in practice, make you invisible to leadership roles. Even if you question this conclusion, the study raises a troubling question. What kind of intelligence truly helps someone gain power? And are we confusing charisma with competence? Because if intelligence can become a burden, then what exactly allows certain people to rise so effortlessly through the ranks? And that's when we enter even darker territory, a psychological principle that reveals why so often we hand power over to the worst possible people. The Dunning-Kruger effect, why the loudest end up on top. Have you noticed how, in many situations, the loudest voice in the room, not necessarily the smartest, often ends up being the most heard? Worse yet, many times that voice is followed, admired, even promoted. This phenomenon is no coincidence. It's a flaw in the human mind. A flaw so deep it has a name, the Dunning-Kruger effect. In the 1990s, psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger described this disturbing cognitive bias. Incompetent people don't just ignore their own ignorance, they actually think they're geniuses. Meanwhile, true experts, aware of the complexities and limits of their own knowledge, hesitate, doubt, question. Centuries before science confirmed this, Shakespeare said it best. The fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool. Machiavelli, with his cold gaze on power, would have understood this perfectly. He would know that, more often than not, blind certainty is more seductive than real knowledge. And modern science confirms it. A 2020 study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology revealed something shocking. Overconfident people are more likely to be perceived as leaders, even if they are completely incompetent. In other words, appearing to be right is more effective than actually being right. History is full of examples proving this cruel logic. Remember George Armstrong Custer, a man whose absurd self-confidence led to disastrous military decisions. Yet he was promoted, idolized, until everything collapsed. In the modern era, just look at the world of technology. Founders who speak with absolute conviction, selling grand visions and far-fetched utopias, often receive billions of dollars, even when their business models are as fragile as wet paper. Adam Neumann, founder of WeWork, is a perfect portrait of this. Even with an unstable company, his messianic self-confidence attracted massive investors and created an almost religious legion of followers. This pattern repeats worldwide. In Japan, Masayoshi Son of SoftBank burned through more than $70 billion on bad bets, yet still kept receiving support thanks to his personal magnetism. In Russia, during the post-Soviet privatization, oligarchs rose not by merit, but through connections and fearless confidence amid chaos. In Singapore, the system was designed to be the opposite, to create institutional filters that prevent self-confidence from outpacing competence. And there's more. In 2012, researchers at Stanford University and the University of Houston reached a disturbing conclusion. Narcissism, not competence, is the strongest predictor of leadership in groups without clear structure. Even more unsettling, these narcissistic leaders didn't deliver better results. They just believed they were doing a great job and managed to convince others of it. The truth is brutal. We live in a world where conviction often matters more than content. And while the wise deliberate, fools rise. Why do we keep choosing the wrong people to lead? The answer lies in how our own brain works. To handle the world's complexity, our mind created mental shortcuts, quick ways to judge what is or isn't trustworthy. And one of the most dangerous shortcuts is this: confidence is mistaken for competence. Quick decision. Our brain interprets it as clarity of thought. These instincts worked well in ancient times when survival depended on immediate action and fast judgment. But in today's complex, technical, and nuanced world, these same shortcuts betray us. And the result? People who know little but act with absolute certainty rise to power, while those who truly understand the depth of problems hesitate, doubt, reflect. But there is something even darker in this cycle. It's not just about how they get to the top. It's about how they manage to stay there. The network effect, when incompetence multiplies. Machiavelli, the master of power analysis, had already seen this dynamic with brutal clarity. Weak leaders surround themselves with even weaker people. In The Prince, he wrote, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." That says it all. Insecure leaders don't choose the best, they choose the least threatening. The flatterers, the obedient, the mediocre. It's a self-preservation strategy. If no one around them is better, no one can overthrow them. And so, incompetence becomes institutionalized. Organizational psychologist Dr. Totoma Komuro-Premuzic named this behavior precisely the threat of competence. Fragile leaders feel threatened by real talent because they know, consciously or unconsciously, they could be exposed, replaced. So they choose blind loyalty over critical ability. The result is devastating, a drought of competence that starts at the top and spreads throughout the entire organization. Historical and current examples. Incompetence as strategy. This pattern is old and lethal. At Emperor Commodus's court, competent figures were replaced by performers, sycophants, and opportunists. Rome, already weakened, plunged into rapid decline. In contemporary Brazil, the centro system is almost a caricature of this phenomenon. Political positions held by those with connections, not merit. A loyalty machine that feeds mediocrity in exchange for political survival. In Africa, Robert Mugabe's late regime in Zimbabwe systematically replaced competent managers with party allies. The result? A devastating economic collapse, driven by political self-preservation. And this isn't just a matter of politics or history, it's an organizational phenomenon. Science has a name for it, homophily, meaning people in power tend to surround themselves with others who are like them in vision, values, and yes, even mediocrity. In practice, incompetent leaders create bubbles of incompetence around themselves, an ecosystem where dissenting opinions are ignored. Criticism is seen as a threat, and asking questions is practically an act of rebellion. Now stop and think. Have you ever worked somewhere where questioning was frowned upon? Where bringing up problems was seen as not being a team player? Where those who pointed out flaws were treated as enemies of progress? These are symptoms of the network effect. Signs of a system where the appearance of harmony hides the silent erosion of excellence. The vicious cycle of incompetence. Even with all this laid bare, we still find ourselves enchanted by leaders who offer easy answers to complex problems. Why? Because our minds crave security. They want certainty, even if it's false. And it is this vulnerability that keeps the cycle spinning. Incompetents rise, surround themselves with more incompetence, and stay in power, not because they're good, but because we've learned wrongly that seeming to know is the same as actually knowing. Cognitive closure. Why do we repeatedly choose leaders who dump simplistic answers on problems that are clearly complex? The answer is deeply rooted in cognitive psychology, and our almost desperate hunger for certainty in a world that rarely offers it. Look, true expertise, the kind that really matters, almost never comes packaged in short phrases and ready-made answers. Real experts, those who master their field, know what they don't know. They recognize complexity, admit dilemmas, aren't afraid to say, there is no perfect solution, but that kind of intellectual honesty is often frustrating. It doesn't feed our appetite for emotional security. It doesn't comfort us. As Machiavelli wrote, the great majority of mankind are satisfied with appearances as if they were realities, and are often more influenced by what seems to be than by what really is. Machiavelli wasn't just describing politics. He was pointing to a structural flaw in the human mind. We prefer false certainties over uncomfortable truths. Look what happens in times of chaos. Pandemics, wars, economic crises. Few rally behind the leader who says, "This is a complicated situation. There are no easy answers. We need to think carefully, make sacrifices, and accept uncertainty." No, the masses follow the one who stands up and shouts, "I know what to do. The solution is simple. Follow me." Even when it's a comforting lie. Take climate change as an example. Real scientists use data, margins of error, multiple scenarios. They speak cautiously because they know what's at stake. Meanwhile, influencers, populist leaders, and celebrities paint the world in black and white. It's either impending apocalypse or it's all a conspiracy. The technical, true, measured version? Ignored, because it demands cognitive effort. The shallow, assertive version? Celebrated, because it offers emotional relief. Another brutal example, public health. Experts explain nuances, side risks, long-term public policies. political figures, offer miracle cures and magic solutions, promises without cost, without dilemmas, without complexity. And it's this fantasy narrative that gets applause. And don't think this is a lack of intelligence. On the contrary, in a 2017 experiment by Yale University researchers, they found something chilling. When faced with political problems involving complex numerical data, people distorted their own calculations to confirm what they already believed. And the most ironic part? The smartest were the worst at it. They used their analytical skills to justify beliefs, not to seek truth. This phenomenon has a name: cognitive closure. It's the psychological drive to seek definite conclusions, even when reality demands ambiguity. Studies show that the more scared or insecure people feel, the greater their need for closure. They reject nuance, they adopt binary thinking, and they cling tightly to any leader who promises clear, quick, and definitive answers. This tendency isn't just an innocent mistake. It's a systemic risk, a collapse of our psychological immune system. Just when we need reflection, caution, and critical thinking the most, we're seduced by mental shortcuts and catchy slogans. This is how illusion beats reality. This is how simplistic thinking beats wisdom. This is how incompetence masquerades as leadership. And if we're not careful, this is how we fall again. Reflect with brutal honesty. Have you ever been seduced by an explanation, not because it was true, but because it was simple, clear, definitive, comforting? Even when, deep down, a more lucid part of your mind whispered, "This is way too simplified." That's the mechanism working inside you. It's the seductive comfort of simplicity. It's the mental shortcut that fools us and weakens us. But this is only the surface. There's a deeper layer, darker, more unsettling. A truth that reveals why intelligence alone is not a sufficient shield against manipulation, and can even become a trap. The weight of moral considerations. Here is where Machiavelli stops being merely controversial and becomes truly unsettling. He stated that morality, for those who seek power, can be a disadvantage, an obstacle, a chain. Perhaps his coldest and most famous line is this: "It is necessary for a prince who wishes to maintain his position to learn how not to be good, and to use this knowledge or not as necessity requires." Read that again. To stop being good. By strategy. Not out of wickedness but calculation. Intelligent people tend to develop a more refined ethical conscience. They can see nuances, weigh dilemmas, see the other side. But this moral sense, which ennobles the spirit, can weaken the hand. Because in power games, those who allow themselves to cross ethical boundaries inevitably gain a strategic advantage. These shadow players can promise the impossible without any intention to deliver, take down rivals with carefully calculated lies, exploit fears and prejudices others are ashamed even to mention. Want a classic example? Cicero and Julius Caesar. Cicero was learned, ethical, brilliant, but lost to Caesar, who, with cold blood and iron ambition, crossed the Rubicon without hesitation. He tore up norms, ignored traditions, did what needed to be done at the cost of ethics. Today, battles are less bloody, but the logic is the same. Look at the political scene. Honest candidates battling with words against opponents armed with lies, slander, and reputation assassination. In corporate environments, it's no different. Researchers at the University of British Columbia identified a disturbing pattern. Individuals with psychopathic traits, emotional coldness, lack of empathy, strategic manipulation, tend to rise faster, especially when they can mask these traits with charm and charisma. This is not an isolated phenomenon. It's global. In China, there's the figure of the Shenu, the ruthless businesswoman who doesn't hesitate to cut ties, manipulate, win. In Nordic countries where culture values collaboration, studies show manipulative leaders still outpace ethical peers, faster and with less resistance. We are facing what game theorists call a race to the bottom. When the unethical thrive, others are forced to play the same game or accept defeat. And over time, systems adapt. Exceptions become the rule. Perverse behavior stops being a deviation and becomes the norm. It's tempting to fall into cynicism after all this. But there is a thread of hope. Not all environments reward stupidity disguised as boldness or unethical behavior masked as competence. Systems can be designed. Environments can be corrected. We can and must recognize the triggers that favor the rise of the worst. Only then can we begin to build structures that filter not just the most ambitious, but the truly worthy. Different environments, different rewards. Machiavelli, with his relentless clarity, understood something many still ignore. Environments shape the winners. Each context selects a different kind of survivor. In some places, competence is the only valid currency. In others, incompetence, dressed up to look brilliant, reigns supreme. But what, after all, defines the character of an environment? What are the invisible elements that determine whether a system rewards excellence or opens the doors for the most skilled mediocre to appear competent? The answer lies in deep structures, in institutional forces that often operate behind the scenes. 1. Feedback cycles and accountability structures. Environments with clear, immediate, and brutally honest feedback are like unbreakable mirrors. They reflect exactly what you deliver. In them, incompetence cannot hide. Imagine a surgeon whose patients repeatedly die, or a bridge engineer whose constructions collapse. Their failure is visible, mistakes have weight, and consequences are unavoidable. These worlds select true competence because reality punishes, without mercy, those who don't measure up. But what if feedback can be manipulated? What if failures can be masked, redirected, or diluted with rhetoric? Then everything changes. Environments like politicians blaming their predecessors, executives hiding failures under doctored reports, communicators trading accuracy for entertainment. All these are ecosystems where incompetence not only survives, it thrives. Their appearance can suffocate substance. 2. Power architecture and institutional design. When power is too concentrated and supervision too lax, incompetence finds freedom. And worse, impunity. The collapse of the Soviet Union is a cruel example of this structural failure, a system handing critical decisions to irresponsible, unquestionable hands. Now look at the other extreme, Germany's corporate governance model, with its dual board system, separating management from oversight, creates structural barriers against the rise of inept leaders. It's the system saying, here, power must pass through filters. 3. Complexity, appearances, and information asymmetry. The more ambiguous the goal, the more room there is for superficial shine to outshine real competence. When success is hard to measure, when indicators are subjective, form becomes more important than substance. Machiavelli already warned, men judge more by the eyes than by the hands. Everyone can see, but only a few can feel. In other words, most people evaluate what seems to be, not what truly is. And the more complex the system, the more people surrender to appearances. That's when snake charmers, masters of language and emotional manipulation, take the stage and win hearts, even when they deliver nothing concrete. 4. Economic incentives and the value of the short term. Systems that reward immediate results create the perfect environment for leaders who know how to play the illusion game. They deliver impressive numbers today, even if they're sowing ruins for the future. The 2008 financial crisis is a living scar of this mistake. It was built by leaders who prioritized quick profits, ignoring systemic risks. They were applauded while digging the hole. And when the collapse came, many had already cashed out and exited the scene. These are systems where charm replaces substance and charisma masks incompetence. Different environments, different rewards. Machiavelli, with his relentless clarity, understood something many still ignore. Environments shape the winners. Each context selects a different type of survivor. In some places, competence is the only valid currency. In others, incompetence, disguised as brilliance, reigns supreme. But what, after all, defines the character of an environment? What are the invisible elements that determine whether a system rewards excellence or opens the door for the most skilled mediocrities at appearing competent? The answer lies in deep structures, in institutional forces that often operate behind the scenes. 1. Feedback cycles and accountability structures. Environments with clear, immediate, and brutally honest feedback are like unbreakable mirrors. They reflect exactly what you deliver. In them, incompetence cannot hide. Imagine a surgeon whose patients keep dying, or a bridge engineer whose constructions collapse. Their failure is visible, error has substance, and consequence is unavoidable. These worlds select true competence because reality punishes, without mercy, those who fall short. But what if feedback can be manipulated? What if failures can be masked, redirected, or diluted with rhetoric? Then everything changes. Environments like politicians who blame their predecessors, executives who hide failures under polished reports, communicators who trade accuracy for entertainment. All these are ecosystems where incompetence not only survives, it thrives. Their appearance can suffocate substance. 2. Power architecture and institutional design. When power is too concentrated and too lightly supervised, incompetence finds freedom. And worse, impunity. The collapse of the Soviet Union is a cruel example of this structural failure, a system that handed critical decisions to irresponsible and unquestionable hands. Now look at the other extreme, Germany's corporate governance model, with its dual board system, which separates those who manage from those who oversee, creates structural barriers against the rise of inept leaders. It's the system saying, here, power must pass through filters. 3. Complexity, appearances, and information asymmetry. The more ambiguous the goal, the more room there is for superficial shine to outshine real competence. When success is hard to measure, when indicators are subjective, form matters more than content. Machiavelli had already warned, men judge more by the eye than by the hand. Everyone can see, few can touch. Meaning, most people evaluate what seems to be, not what actually is. And the greater the complexity of the system, the more people succumb to appearances. That's when snake charmers, masters of language and emotional manipulation, take the stage and win hearts, even when delivering nothing concrete. 4. Economic incentives and the value of the short term. Systems that reward immediate results create the perfect environment for leaders who know how to play the illusion game. They deliver impressive numbers now, even if they are sowing future ruins. The 2008 financial crisis is a living scar of this mistake. It was built by leaders who prioritized quick profits, ignoring systemic risks. They were applauded while digging the hole. And when the collapse came, many had already profited and left the scene. These are systems where charm replaces substance and charisma erases incompetence. Now look at your own reality. What are the incentives around you? What structures, visible or invisible, are shaping who wins and who gets discarded? Do you live in an environment that rewards real competence? Or in a system where those who deceive best climb fastest? Recognizing these structural forces is vital. It's the first step to protect yourself and, when possible, transform the environment around you. Because even the best designed systems can be corrupted by leaders who master the art of psychological manipulation. And if we don't know how to identify and neutralize them, we end up hostage, not to ignorance, but to well-presented illusion. Psychological tactics. Incompetent leaders don't stay in power by luck. They know exactly what they're doing. They use refined psychological tactics to root their authority. Strategies that Machiavelli, with his sharp eye, would have immediately recognized. First, they manipulate tribalism and identity politics. They create sharp divisions between us and them, turning legitimate criticism into malicious attacks from supposed enemies. This shields them from accountability and, at the same time, inflames the emotional loyalty of their followers. This phenomenon has a name: identity fusion. It's when a leader manages to fuse their personal image with the group's identity. From that point on, challenging them isn't just criticism. It's a direct attack on the group itself, its cause, and the very essence of its followers. Cult leaders like Jim Jones or authoritarian figures who marked history mastered this game with expertise. In Malaysia, Former Prime Minister Najib Razak manipulated ethnic divisions to stay in power, even under the weight of corruption scandals. In Brazil, the intense political polarization during Bolsonaro's government showed how tribal loyalty can silence even the most obvious facts. Second, they take advantage of informational chaos. Faced with cognitive overload, they throw the population into a whirlwind of crises, scandals, and controversies. When our minds are exhausted trying to decode the scandal of the day, there's little energy left for discernment, critical thinking, or coordinated resistance. Third, they apply doublethink, the concept immortalized by George Orwell, the art of holding two opposing beliefs at the same time. They shift narratives, distort the past, reinterpret facts, and make it seem natural. Truth becomes a foggy field and accountability an impossibility. As Machiavelli wrote, the vulgar crowd is always deceived by appearances, and the world is mostly made up of vulgarity. He didn't mock the common people, but recognized a fragility we all carry. Our brain evolved to handle simple worlds. When plunged into a sea of ambiguity and information overload, it becomes easy prey for manipulation. Fourth, they exploit economic pain and cracks in the system. In times of crisis, when tomorrow seems threatening, people cling to those who promise simple answers, even if those answers are false. In the deindustrialized regions of the world, financial anxiety opens space for mediocre leaders who offer scapegoats instead of honest reforms. Now think, how many times have you found yourself fascinated by yet another controversy, another scandalous headline, and ignored truly structural, complex, deep issues? Exactly. That is the trap. Recognizing these dark mechanisms is the first step. But it's not enough to see the enemy. We must develop real, conscious, and collective defenses so that our attention, decisions, and communities are not captured by those who offer nothing but smoke. Awareness. Individual awareness is the first shield against subtle manipulation of power. It's the silent sentinel that separates the free thinker from the blind follower. And this defense begins with three fundamental mental attitudes. First, cultivate intellectual humility. Recognizing we don't know everything is not weakness, it's brute strength against dogmatism. Studies show intellectually humble people don't follow ideas out of emotional loyalty, but because of concrete evidence. This humility acts like a mental immune system. It prevents false certainties from infecting our judgment, just as the body repels invisible viruses. Second, develop media literacy. It's not enough to consume information, we need to decode it. This means learning to separate substance from spectacle, facts from carefully edited narratives. It means choosing intentionally where you seek truth. Warren Buffett once said, "Really successful people say no to almost everything." Apply this to your content consumption. Wise minds don't drown in noise, they dive deep into clarity. Third, practice philosophical reflection. Take a step back, get out of the daily flood, and observe the deeper patterns that guide us. The ancient Stoics advocated daily reflection as a shield against impulsive reactions. Francis Bacon said, "The wise man creates more opportunities than he finds." By reflecting, we stop being mere puppets of the environment and become conscious authors of our mental universe. Collectively, the antidote is in institutional design. Poorly designed systems amplify human errors, but well-constructed systems can mitigate them. There are three fundamental pillars here. First, real accountability. Charismatic leadership is not enough. There must be mechanisms that challenge power and demand consistency. Think of companies with independent boards versus those where the board just rubber stamps decisions. The Boeing 737 MAX disaster showed the price of omission. Engineers were ignored, lives were lost, and truth was buried under profit and silence. Second, cognitive diversity. Including different worldviews is not a political favor, it's strategic precision. Diverse groups challenge weak ideas, reveal hidden flaws, and make more balanced decisions. Homogeneity makes us blind. Diversity keeps us awake. Third, transparency as principle, not exception. Complexity cannot serve as a hiding place for incompetence. Rules that expose conflicts of interest, that demand clarity and openness, make it harder to mask disastrous decisions under a layer of technical jargon. Education, the bridge between the individual and the collective. Educating isn't just about passing on skills, it's about shaping critical minds. Athens founded the academy. Florence shaped the humanists. The greatest civilizations don't just teach, they cultivate wisdom. So, look around you, what protections like these exist in your community, which have been neglected? And if we reimagined everything based on truth, competence, and humility, what kind of civilization could we build? Conclusion: the Machiavellian dilemma. Machiavelli didn't applaud the dirty games of power. He exposed them. He showed us the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. And because of that, many feared him, few understood him. When he wrote, "It is not titles that honor men, but men who honor titles," he made it clear, authority is not inherited. It's earned through merit and the dignity of actions. The intersection of Machiavellian coldness and modern psychology reveals something unsettling. We are all vulnerable to illusions of power, but it is precisely this discomfort that we need to face. Not to surrender to darkness, but to understand it and overcome it. To design systems that respect our vulnerabilities instead of exploiting them. To cultivate personal practices that reinforce our integrity, even amid chaos. And above all, to remember that while stupidity can climb to positions of command, intelligence combined with moral courage remains our greatest chance to build a just world. And you? Have you noticed these dynamics in your own community? Have you seen leaders exploiting fear, division, and ignorance as tools of control? Share your experiences in the comments. If this journey has brought you value, subscribe and share it with those who also need to awaken. And remember, understanding darkness is not giving in to it, it's gaining the power to light the way.